Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. I brought back to the show Steven Selikoff. How you doing, Steven?
Great. How you doing, Danny?
Yeah, good. Interesting you reached out to me on this news, which is upcoming. What date is it when the contracts are being renegotiated or they expire?
They expire at the last day of June.
Okay, so for the last day of June, we could look at some troubles ahead. Longshoremen, obviously with the unions and everything else, and this is over in California, if I'm right. Yeah.
Yep, California, whole West Coast, Seattle, Oakland, California, San Diego,
Cool.
Long Beach.
Let for the audience. Why don't we set the scene? Just take it back a few steps and explain what's going on.
All right. So the longshoremen are the folks who take the products off of the boats, move them around in the yard, sit in those big cranes and stuff like that. And every 8 to 10 years, they renegotiate their contract. Back in 2014, when they renegotiated their contract, they weren't happy with the way things were going. And even though they started at the table together, after a few months, they said, nope, we're going to have a slowdown. And I'll tell you, as someone who had product coming into the US, that slowdown was horrendous. I and thousands of other people didn't make fourth quarter Christmas holiday. So we know that the longshoremen are willing to play hard. And in fact, right after the holiday, they actually did a complete shutdown. Now we're looking at the same thing coming up now, but we're in a very different environment. Back then, the shipping companies, rather famously, had been losing billions of dollars every year. They lost close to $100 billion between the year 2000 and 2020. So that's a lot to lose. And of course, they had a bit of sympathy from the longshoremen. But this year is a completely different situation. The longshoremen worked their tails off during COVID, during the pandemic, during dangerous times, during short shifts.
Well, it's a dangerous job and backbreaking, isn't it, as well?
Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. So they're going to want some compensation. But this time, instead of saying, oh, we've been losing money all of these years, last year alone, the shipping companies as a whole made $190 billion. And that's just that's staggering. So we can't expect that the longshoremen are going to be particularly sympathetic to the shipping companies, and we know that they're willing to play hardball. So that's
I'm not surprised. Can I just interject here? I was just saying before the show, I was just pulling up some data on them because obviously you're talking about the strike of 2014. There was also one in 2012, and there was obviously greater job security for union members and stuff. What I found really interesting about this is those guys in the union, the average, what there's basically in the US, it's marked as of 18th of April 2022. There's 5,361. That doesn't sound like a huge amount to me. We can get into the holidays and stuff at the moment. And it says here about half the West Coast union longshoremen make more than 100,000 a year, some much more. According to shipping industry data, more than half of foremen and managers earn more than 200,000 a year. A few bosses make 300,000 a year. And what's quite interesting is the wages that the longshoremen get. Obviously, they're foot soldiers on the ground. The top earners are on £21 an hour, 75% top percentile is 20, average is 16, the 25% percentile is 13. That translates to 43,000, 40,000, 32,000 and 27,000. Now, obviously with that data available and with all the shipping companies combined making 190 billion, I mean, they will dig their heels in, right? You're going to look at the union's going to want even more money. You mentioned off call that they have so many holidays. One of them is because of the founder of the longshoremen. They get a day off for them as well. But it's different, I suppose. If your boots on the ground, you deserve all those holidays for the dangerous, heavy busting work. But does the union reps deserve that?
Yeah, well, we were talking before about the Marlon Brando movie On the Waterfront. If you want to see how corrupt it's been in the past, and of course they don't they claim it's not corrupt anymore. But watch that great movie. But it really gives you a sense of the difference between the union leaders and the grunt work.
Yeah. It says here, how long are the longshore shifts? Obviously, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
They do have limits on how many each of them work.
Oh, themselves. What I mean, it doesn't stop working. They'll just shift people in. It doesn't show individual shifts, but yeah, no one can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, be dead in 2 days. Yeah.
Yeah, and during COVID, talk about people being dead in 2 days. During COVID, even though we saw all the congestion and we saw how many ships were coming into the ports, and yet a lot of people who were non-union lost their jobs.
Yeah.
So now you've also got a bunch of people out there who are willing to come into the docks and work if the union goes on a full work stoppage and strike. Now you've got people coming in saying, hey, we want a job back. We'll work for a little, but they're not as experienced. They're not protected and so on. So there's dynamics going on there. And then last Friday, President Biden went to the port of Los Angeles and the port of Long Beach, and he made a speech there. And for the first time in any of these years of negotiations, the president actually called out the greed of the shipping companies and positioned himself behind the longshoremen, which would be nice, except that the week before, the Federal Maritime Commission, which is part of the government, they came out with their own announcement saying that the shipping companies were not greedy and that all of this increase in rates were justified. They weren't price gouging or anything. So now you've got two parts of the government basically taking opposite sides and encouraging both sides to dig their heels in. This is not a good. I mean, I really hope that there is no slowdown, there is no strike. But the thing is, as you and I talked, as businessmen, we need to be prepared. We need to set up a strategy to avoid the West Coast for shipping.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
All right. During COVID, there was during the congestion, there was a lot of posturing from some of the governors on the East Coast of the U.S. saying, come here, come here, come here. Not all of those ports were able to take deep water ships. Not all of them had the facilities to take on larger container ships, but there are more than enough up and down the entire East Coast for container ships to come in. There are most of the China to U.S. shipping goes to the West Coast, but you want to be able to take advantage of those that are going to the East Coast. And frankly, even if you come to the East Coast and do your intermodal transportation by sticking your container or your products onto a rail car and going back across the U.S., it still removes that risk. And it's the risk we need to be worried about.
So what could it look like? Let's just say we get to the end of the month, because this can happen quite fast, can't it? So obviously, if you've got all your products on the ocean now, you're doing an inventory turn at the moment, there's not much you can do, but you can plan forward for future inventory, i.e. Q4 and stuff, which most people are still working on, if not on its way already. So what does this look like on the 1st of June? Let's just say a best case scenario. The best case scenario, everyone's happy, they get paid in full, they get a great compensation package, and then this podcast is a waste of time, which would be great for Amazon sellers. That's the hope, right? In the event of that, what does the ugly side look like?
I think the ugly side is not going to happen immediately.
Yeah.
I think because there are politicians involved, everyone's going to sit down at the table and make nice, but they're not going to get anywhere until someone stands up and says, this is not going to happen. Last time this occurred, it was May, and it was probably another 4 or 5 months before the slowdown began. But we know, and obviously the longshoremen know, that Q4 is the most important retail time for the U.S. So if they're going to make a move, if they're going to posture and try to make it big, they'll make it in a month, maybe 2, probably less. If they're going to at least try to look like they're good players, they may wait until August or September, and then they'll start a slowdown. But The other part of this that's going on is at the same talk from Biden, he also talked about decreasing some of the tariffs coming into the US.
Mm.
And that's going to certainly have an impact on our costs. And we want to take advantage of that. We want to set our timing so that we start shipping when the tariffs come down and not before. And at the same time, we've got a slowdown in the amount of ships that are actually more production going on in China. So that's going to be going on. It's a real balancing act. And you could win or you could lose, seeing how things go.
Yeah. So if we're saying politicians involved, it won't all stop on June 1st, right? But what length of time are we talking about? Will someone be kind of ruthless with the time, or is this something that will go on to 4 to 6 weeks? So you say 1st of June goes into mid-July, August. So
they may be sitting at the table for 4 to 6 weeks, but if they start a slowdown and a strike, last time it lasted 8-9 months.
So would a slowdown possibly happen during the negotiations, just for leverage?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So got to consider that. And so let's look at switching costs. Let's break that down for people.
Well, depending on how you're shipping and who you're using to ship, it could be, frankly, nothing to relatively little as far as dollars are concerned. And then there's the additional time it takes. So you're going to add another week to 10 days or less, depending on what boats you're on and so on. So the cost to the Amazon seller is not going to be that much.
Yeah.
But the risk is going to be much higher.
Yeah. So effectively, when it comes down to this, could have very much little impact right now if you've got something on the ocean already, right? Because you're buying a bit of time. You've got, say, till mid-July. Great. Yeah. 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes a bit longer, depends. It depends from when you've closed out at the factory and obviously shipped your goods and then put on the ocean. But what about someone who's working now, really, isn't it? It's someone who's sitting here listening to this podcast and going, all right, we better switch, really, just to be safe. Yeah.
Yep.
And then allow for that 10 to 15 days, just because it's preserving the whole of their Q4 effectively, because some of them are going to be putting out, all of their output will be done in and around now. So their biggest expenditure leading into Q4. So that's where the most of the risk is obviously coming from, is a mistiming, sending it over to California, something out the unknown happens, and then that's your Q4 over.
Correct. The longshoremen know the impact of a slowdown and a work stoppage.
Yeah.
They know that if they keep ships from landing, everything from Amazon sellers to retail sellers to machines that are used in production of cars and everything else that's being shipped, that they're going to have a big outcry from the public saying, hey, get this fixed. They want that. They're not going to do it just because they're petulant. They're going to do it because they know they're going to get a big impact. And as I told you, I had my own products that were stuck. So I know that they're ruthless. They will wait. Now, a couple of interesting things to it. One is it's kind of like going to want to see a popular movie in the cinema. In the cinema, small. It doesn't have that many seats. There are less boats going to the East Coast. Yeah. So you want to work with your freight forwarder and let them know early so they can get you onto those boats and those containers, because you don't want to be locked out and miss the movie in this case. And the other thing is, and I think most smart sellers these days know about insurance. Insurance won't cover a work stoppage or a work slowdown.
Yeah. Interesting. Is there anything else you want to cover?
Well, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens when the decrease in tariffs occur. I think that there's an optimistic thought that it's going to bring prices down. I think that within Amazon sellers, we're going to see a big drop. And within the goods that you buy off the store shelves and try to keep your family, fed and clothed, we're not going to see a drop at all. I think we're going to see the JCPenney effect there. Yeah. So the JCPenney effect is they would artificially increase their prices and then create a sale, drop them down, create a sale, drop them down, and so on. They brought in a new CEO who said, we're done with that. We're just going to have good prices the moment you walk in.
Yeah.
He did that. Nobody bought because they thought the prices would fluctuate. It ended up putting JCPenney into bankruptcy and that CEO on the street. So I don't think we're going to see retailers letting that price drop. They've already softened U.S. consumers. Maybe for food items, it will go back a little bit lower, but for regular items, everyone's already been softened up. They know that they'll reach in their pocket and pay for it. So we won't see price drops there. But the opposite is true with Amazon sellers. Everyone's competing by price. And as soon as those tariffs come down, Mary's going to say, okay, I'm going to drop my price a little bit because the tariff is gone. It's costing me less. And then Paul's going to say, oh, wait, I'm going to drop mine below you, and so on. And it can be very quickly become, a price war. It's supply and demand. You've got a stable demand and a increasing supply that pushes the equilibrium down because everyone's going to start competing, and that's going to push the price down. Yeah. So I think we're going to see people taking advantage of those decreased tariffs as quickly as possible. Hopefully, people don't start eating each other's profits and hurting each other.
Yeah, indeed. Cool. Anything you want to cover before we go? I mean, we've been running 15 minutes or so, but I think we've pretty much chunked it all down, haven't we?
Absolutely. It's just always a pleasure to get a chance to chat, and I think we'll be seeing each other in person a little bit later this year.
Yes, we'll be down in Australia in September. So be good to see you in person. Guys, thank you for joining us today. Steven, what's the best way people can reach you?
Steven at productdevelopmentacademy.com. Straightforward. And I'm always happy to chat and respond to emails. We are in a crazy business, but it's the best business in the world. So.
Indeed. All right, guys, thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if this is your first time. Take care of yourself and your family. Much love, and I'll see you again soon.